What about foreign policy? Some people have been critical of your lack of experience there.
Well, I have as much as many of the other people running, including other former governors. What I do have is the history of having been to probably between 35 and 40 countries, extensively to the Middle East, to Israel 9 times. I've been to Syria, to Lebanon, to Egypt. I've been to Jordan, Iraq, Afghanistan. Been throughout most of Europe, to Russia, to Asia, to Mexico. Again, I feel like that sometimes people just make an assumption that you don't have any experience, when in fact a governor has the experience of dealing not only with multinational corporations that you do business with in your state, and sometimes actually signing arrangements with those countries and companies, but it also involves dealing with the heads of state in cultural and educational exchanges, traveling extensively. But even more than that, it's about your principles and values and what you understand is right about America and how do you put that into policy. Ronald Reagan didn't have a whole lot of foreign policy experience. That was the rub on him as well. But he knew what he believed about the world. He knew what he believed about America. And he translated that into a foreign policy agenda that resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union, the coming down of the Berlin Wall, and the end of the Cold War. I'd say he had a pretty good run. So history is filled with examples of people who were criticized for their maybe lack of obvious experience, but served this country quite well.
Your Christmas ad that you recently released is taking some criticism. And in fact, this morning, the Catholic League President Bill Donahue said, quote, "This is injecting religion into politics even too far for guys like me." How would you respond to those critics?
Merry Christmas.
Would you say that you are crossing the line between?
Of course not. When is it, if we are so politically correct in this country that a person can't say enough of the nonsense of political attack ads, could we pause for a few days and say Merry Christmas to each other, then we're really, really in trouble as a country.
I don't think that it was the Christmas angle, it was the birth of Christ angle. Could you address that?
I don't know what else to call Christmas. Last time I checked, that's what we celebrate. And if somebody can give me a way to get around that and to do it honestly, perhaps, but I mean, that's what Christmas is. The very word Christmas comes from the contraction of Christ, Mass, the worship of Christ. Again, change the word if we don't want to talk about it, but that's what it symbolizes and represents. By the way, there was one of the most amazing things that I have heard this morning. There are those who try to say that the bookshelf behind us in the background is a subtle subliminal message. I was there. By the way, first of all, the ad was not scripted. That was not a scripted ad. I didn't have a teleprompter. It had not been written in advance. It was an ad-lib spot as I looked at the camera and spoke into it and was told at the end of a day in which we were shooting commercials, let's do a Christmas spot. And, I said, how are we going to do it? And they said, just wing it. So they had a timer, and that's the spot. That was a bookshelf behind me, a bookshelf. And so now I have these people saying, oh, there was a subtle message there. Actually, I will confess this. If you play the spot backwards, it says, Paul is dead, Paul is dead, Paul is dead. So the next thing you'll know that somebody will be playing it backwards to find out the subliminal messages that are really there in backmasking. I never cease to be amazed at the manner in which people will try to dissect the simplest messages. Can't even say Merry Christmas anymore without somebody getting all upset about it. Yes.
To receive some criticism for pardons in the past. And some of your critics say that means you're not tough on crime as a result of some of these pardons, which included 12, according to some, 12 murderers. What's your stance on that?
Well, first of all, to say that I'm soft on crime is ludicrous, in that I carried out something that no other candidate, including those who are most critical of me, have done, and that's the death penalty. And I did it 16 times. It's hard to be soft on crime when you carry out the death penalty. The fact is, the harshest attacks have come from Mr. Romney, who has made a television ad attacking me. But here's the record. On methamphetamine, he talks about that we reduce the sentences. The sentence for a meth dealer in Arkansas is 10 years to life. In Massachusetts, it's roughly 2.5 years for the same thing. Our sentences are twice as harsh at minimum than they were in Massachusetts. Somebody should ask him about that. What we did in reducing was not reducing the total sentence, it was reducing the time that a person had to be served before they could be eligible. That was from the 70% to the 50% law that made it the same as other crimes. There had been a harsh penalty put into place earlier. without going into all the boring details, the real reality is that if you have a person in prison and you tell him, okay, if you behave and do well and get an education and learn a job skill, your time served is 10 years. But if you act up, misbehave, spit on people, learn nothing, and are belligerent every day you're here, you're going to serve 10 years. Guess what kind of behavior you get out of the inmate? So it was at the request of the prison that we created the pathway so that their good behavior would be as it were for other crimes. And that's exactly what it was. By the way, here's an interesting thing that you need to know, and maybe you could ask Mr. Romney about this. In his 4 years in office, there were 100 requests for commutations that he had across his desk. During my tenure, I had 8,700 requests for commutations. Part of what he doesn't tell you is that each state has different criteria by how these things are done. So I denied virtually 90% of all the commutations that came to me. What he also doesn't seem to want to tell you is that sometimes these commutations came as a person was, let's say, 35 years old, and they had written a hot check when they were 18. And the result of that conviction when 18 in a hot check, nonviolent offense, they had never done a single day of prison time for it. It was a probated sentence or paid a fine. But it meant that even when they went to apply for a job to take out the bedpan of a nursing home, they couldn't get hired because they had the conviction. So if you didn't give that person a pardon, they would be, in essence, unemployable, even in the most menial entry-level jobs that we had in the community. Now, politically, there's no advantage ever to issue a commutation. And if I had acted in my own best political interest, I would have never, ever considered one. But my job was to be the governor. It was to look at every case and look at it with a sense of responsibility and to ask, is it the proper thing to do to consider it? I think I did my job and I did it responsibly. I don't think you want a president who refuses to look at that responsibility. Interestingly, Mr. Romney has commended President Bush for the pardon of Scooter Libby. Yet he brags that he never gave one as governor. I think it's interesting, too, that one of them that he didn't give, and this is one I'd like to mention, was to a gentleman by the name of Anthony Sircosta, who, when he was 13 years old, was accused and convicted of assault for shooting at another boy. He shot at that boy with a BB gun. The BB didn't break the skin. So Anthony Sircosta, age 13, gets a conviction because he hit a kid with a BB, didn't break the skin. Anthony Sircosta worked his way through college. He joined the Army National Guard, and he led a platoon of 20 soldiers in Iraq's deadly Sunni Triangle. In 2005, as he was serving in Iraq, he asked for a pardon from the state of Massachusetts and Mitt Romney so he could become a police officer. Mitt Romney refused his pardon. Now, why did he refuse that pardon? Of a decorated, honored soldier who had worked his way through college and whose crime was he shot another kid at age 13 with a BB gun. People need to understand the real record here. Did Mitt Romney act in the best interest of Anthony Sircosta or in the best interest of Mitt Romney? If you're going to be elected to a job, you need to be elected to do the job that's best for the citizens, not for your own political future, whether you're Mike Huckabee or Mitt Romney.